children found starving, chained to beds.
They were absolutely terrified.
The biggest scandal in our lifetime is staring them in the face. The politicization of the highest levels of the FBI and the Justice Department.
It is as corrupt. It's probably more corrupt than we know.
He is giving the Democrat who is accusing him of using harsh language something that Democratic lawmakers dread, a nickname, Senator Dickie Durbin.
I know what happened. I stand behind every word that I said.
As always, I'm Heather Childers. Right to our top story for you right now, though. President Trump firing back at Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, blasting him for misrepresenting what he said during an Oval Office meeting on DACA, as the government shutdown looms with still no deal for dreamers in sight. Griff Jenkins joins us now from Washington, D.C. with the very latest on this. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Heather. We sure seem to be a far cry from where we were a week ago today. Remember, we watched the president negotiating in real time with Democrats for nearly an hour. Now the president says Democrats don't even want to make a deal, as a bitter fight is playing out between Senator Dick Durbin and the president, at odds over what the president said in that Oval Office meeting. And now we have a new nickname. The president tweeting, Senator Dickie Durbin totally misrepresented what was said at the DACA meeting. Deals can't get made when there is no trust. Durbin blew DACA and is hurting our military. But the Democrats' top negotiator, responsible for revealing the S-hole controversy in the first place, is vigorously defending his allegation.
I know what happened. I stand behind every word that I said. In terms of that meeting, I'm focused on one thing, not that meeting, but on making sure that those who are being protected by DACA and eligible for the DREAM Act have a future in America. I'm focused on that full time.
If there is any hope that a bipartisan DACA deal is still possible, Rep. Martha McSally says Democrats need to get over the idea of a clean deal without the president's priorities.
There's no such thing as doing a clean DREAM Act. The Democrats need to get over it. It's not happening. We in our bill have come up with the president's priorities, the American people's priorities, and that should be a starting place for these negotiations.
Meanwhile, a growing list of Democrats led by Maxine Waters have announced they will boycott the president's State of the Union speech 2 weeks from tonight. You see them there. And, you know, look, bottom line, Heather, if there is no deal on immigration by Friday night, Democrats could refuse to support that funding bill, and we could be headed for a government showdown. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, you know, there was a good suggestion on Twitter for every Democrat who doesn't show for the State of the Union and the guest that they were supposed to bring, allow a veteran to go in their place. I think that's a great idea. All right. Thank you very much, Griff. Well, Democrats say that they're boycotting the State of the Union, as you heard Griff talking about, to send a message to President Trump. But constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley says that it sends a much different message to voters who put President Trump in the office because they're sick of political grandstanding.
What's missing here is this idea that there are very few occasions where we come together as a unified government, and this is one of them. I think also it misses what is desperately needed right now. People are really upset with their government, but they're also not confident that their government's able to work together. At this moment, more than any moment, I think all of the representatives of these branches need to show the public that they are performing their duties, they are showing up, and they are listening. That doesn't mean they have to agree with him. You also have to look at your institutional responsibilities. They are not there like they're going to some, a bridal shower. It is an official function for all three branches, and it's a symbol of a unified government.
Well, this time last year, Congressman John Lewis led the charge of more than 50 Democrats who refused to attend President Trump's inauguration. Can't believe it's been a year. A former White House chief strategist, meantime, Steve Bannon, set to take the stand today. He will testify behind closed doors as part of the House's investigation into alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Now, he will likely face some questions about Michael Wolff's explosive book, Fire and Fury, in which Bannon is quoted calling a 2016 meeting in Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer, quote, treasonous. White House Communications Director Hope Hicks could also testify as soon as Friday. And the White House is set to release some more details about President Trump's first physical exam as commander-in-chief today. A Navy physician, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, said that President Trump, who is 71 years old, is in, quote, excellent health after his checkup on Friday, but will provide a more in-depth update today. Presidents are not required to undergo medical exams, but he did. And this is just a horrible story. This Fox News alert, disturbing, coming out of California. They're calling it a house of horrors. Several children found starving, chained to beds. The parents arrested after one of their brave daughters escaped to call police. Todd Pyro is here with the horrific new details. Now, we say children, but they believe these to be children. Several of them were, what, like 18 years old? It's
Several
horrible.
of them were adults. We're going to get to that.
Crazy.
But to say this is disturbing is an understatement. When officers went inside the home of David and Louise Turpin, they found several children shackled to beds with chains and padlocks in dark and foul-smelling surroundings. That's a quote. The parents unable to explain why. Now, the investigation began after a 17-year-old girl escaped from the home in Paris, California, and called 911 early Sunday to report that her 12 brothers and sisters were being held by their parents. Investigators, like Heather just said, initially believed that girl was just 10 years old because she was so emaciated, and they also thought all the victims were children, but eventually discovered seven of them were adults. The sheriff's office said the victims appeared to be malnourished and very dirty. They were sent to local hospitals for treatment, but their conditions were not immediately known.
They were all in PJs because it was early in the morning. They were very, very pale skinned, like almost like they've never seen the sun. But I've seen a couple of the older ones, so they all, and it was mostly girls, and then kind of small framed, I'd say kind of tiny, almost looked a little malnutritioned.
I always had a suspicion because that house never looked like there was a lot of action in front of it.
Los Angeles Times reported that Turpin's home address was listed as the location of the Sandcastle Day School. It's a public K-12 institution that opened in 2011. Also, the New York Times reported that the Turpins filed for bankruptcy that same year. And at that time, David Turpin worked as an engineer at Northrop Grumman. David and Louise Turpin each being held on $9 million bail.
Man, it's so I didn't know that the number was how many were adults? Seven?
Seven.
Wow. And then that picture is so disturbing of the whole family with the children in their T-shirts.
In their T-shirts, or the Dr. Seuss T-shirts.
Yeah, thing one, thing right.
Yeah. This is a heartbreaking and disturbing story.
Much more to come on it. Thank you, Saad. Well, the man suspected of brutally murdering an Ivy League student will face a judge today. Samuel Woodward is expected to be formally charged with stabbing his friend Blaze Bernstein 20 times in a possible act of rage. His blood also found at the crime scene. The 19-year-old University of Pennsylvania student was found in a shallow grave in a park 1 week after he was reported missing. And some brand new videos showing the horrific moments when 50 passengers are forced to jump into icy waters to escape a massive inferno on a casino boat. We brought you the story yesterday. Officials now say that at least one woman has died, succumbing to her injuries just hours after the emergency off the coast of Florida. 14 other people were injured. Now, the captain of this Sand Cruz casino boat is now being hailed a hero, though, for bringing the boat as close to shore as possible. A burned out hull is all that remains. Look at that. And then an American flag continuing to fly. The cause of the fire is unknown, but the company says that the boat didn't have any prior issues at all. So that investigation continues. To North Korea now, where they have not reacted to Hawaii's false missile alert. That is according to U.S. Defense Chief General Jim Mattis. It comes after an emergency management employee pressed the wrong button by mistake, triggering panic. And General Mattis also expressing some confidence that authorities in Hawaii would fix the warning system and put new procedures in place. Leaders of the Free Syrian Army meeting with President Trump today. They're hoping for more support against the deadly attacks from the Assad regime, including threats from Russia and Iran. Now, this comes as Syrian citizens may be victims of another gas attack. 6 people reportedly treated for chlorine intake after a missile strike after it struck a Damascus suburb. Assad killed more than 90 of his own people, you may remember, back with a chemical attack last April, prompting the U.S. to destroy a Syrian airbase with 59 missiles. Well, 2 countries vowing to fight back against President Trump for keeping his campaign promise.
we'll end up probably terminating NAFTA at some point. We will renegotiate NAFTA or we will terminate NAFTA.
Well, Canada and Mexico slamming the president's plan to pull the U.S. from the trade agreement if he does not get a better deal. Canada accusing the U.S. of almost 200 unfair trade practices, and Mexico is threatening to stop negotiations if the White House begins the 6-month withdrawal process. The next round of NAFTA talks will start January 23rd. Well, the lead singer of the Irish rock group The Cranberries has died. Dolores O'Riordan suddenly passed away in a London hotel before a recording session. Her publicist says that her family is, quote, devastated by the shocking news. No word on the cause of death, but she did have a long history of depression. O'Riordan was 46 years old. And the time now is about 11 minutes after the top of the hour. Top Democrat putting pressure on Republicans to release the full testimony from Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson. But is it all just a trap set up for the Trump administration? Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton weighs in up next. Plus, the next phase of data collection is right underneath your feet. How stores are using floor sensors to track your every move. And it's no secret that President Trump loves McDonald's, but apparently he also loves Starburst, too. The Candy Crush melting the internet. Well, welcome back. The top Democrat on the House Intel Committee is now calling for the release of all transcripts from hearings on the dossier after the explosive release of testimony from Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson. Congressman Adam Schiff releasing this statement saying, in light of the selective leaks of Mr. Simpson's testimony and the misleading manner in which Fusion GPS's role has been characterized, I support releasing the transcript. Here now to weigh in is the president of Judicial Watch, President Tom Fitton. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it, as always.
You're welcome. Heather, good to see you.
So what do you think about this latest call from Adam Schiff to release all of the Fusion GPS transcripts?
Well, it's no surprise that the top Democrat, who has been terribly partisan on the House Intelligence Committee, wants to release a transcript by Hillary Clinton's campaign vendor that is the equivalent of Nixon's modified limited hangout, where where you may recall the game was to selectively release information in a piecemeal way without the full context. And, you know, we want more information. Obviously, Judicial Watch is in court suing for information. So the selective leaking or the selective disclosure of transcripts is right up the Democrat alley here. And it is going to, you know, ironically, they're just hoping the American people ignore even what is being released, because the last transcript of Glenn Simpson that was released raised some questions about what Clinton was up to.
And that was, what, 300 and something pages long?
Yeah, I read the 310 pages, and, you know, there's lots of gaps of information there. And it highlights the need, frankly, to bring in Mrs. Clinton to testify to Congress and her top campaign aides about what they knew and when about the collaboration of her campaign with Russia to target Donald Trump, and the collaboration of her campaign vendor, Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson, with the Justice Department and the FBI under the Obama administration to target Donald Trump and his people.
Yeah, and speaking of the Hillary Clinton campaign, let's talk a little bit more about this indictment that was handed down in the uranium investigation. Is this just the beginning of all of this? Who do you think is next?
Well, I hope so. There's a two-headed snake when it comes to the Uranium One scandal. During the Obama administration, they laundered money, it looks like, into the Clinton Foundation to help get a certain result, which was allow the Russia state-owned firms to get their piece of the pie in terms of the uranium market here in the United States. And then secondly, they had some internal issues here in the United States where they wanted to increase their market share and do more business here. And this scandal, this indictment, is part of the second part, where you had kickbacks and other illegal activity tied to Russian activities here in the United States. And the question is they're going to follow up with Hillary Clinton? Is the same group involved in kickbacks and bribery? Is it tied to the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton machine and the Obama administration?
And the massive amounts of money that they raised. When did this investigation begin? And why are we just now getting to an indictment? And did the Obama administration know about this investigation at the time that the uranium deal was made?
Well, according to reports in 2009, they understood that the Russians were funneling money into the Clinton machine in order to get a good result on Uranium One. The last indictment, or I think plea deal or conviction, was in 2015, and it was kind of buried by the Obama administration because they didn't want to tie it to Hillary Clinton. So Jeff Sessions evidently is paying more attention now, and this is a sorely needed follow-up. And the question is, are they going to devote the same resources Robert Mueller is to investigating Lord knows what, to investigating the more substantial charges of Russia government shenanigans in terms of getting involved in the uranium market here in the United States by taking care of politicians like Hillary Clinton?
Tom, I have to get you to answer this, though, because the argument on the other side is always that there was a whole panel of people that had to approve this Uranium One deal, that Hillary Clinton was just one of amongst a lot of people. Does that matter? Does that change anything?
It actually increases the need for an investigation because many of those people should have known about this investigation, such as Eric Holder at the Department of Justice, obviously Hillary Clinton at the State Department. So I would ask that the investigation be broadened to include what the Justice Department knew and the FBI knew, and why it is this information was suppressed from Congress and wasn't made public in a way as to affect these discussions. And we still don't have the full information as to what Hillary Clinton knew and what the State Department knew about Russian activities here in the United States with Uranium One. So just because she was in a position to kill it.
Yeah, it's just drastically different if you take a look at how this investigation was handled, is still being handled, and the investigation that's going on right now between the Trump administration and the possible collusion with Russia.
$145 million flowed from Russia entities into the Clinton Foundation around the time of the decision making here. And we don't have still an official investigation.
145 million. All right, Tom, that's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Heather.
Well, the time now is about 20 minutes after the top of the hour. Violent protests breaking out at Berkeley, targeting conservative speakers. How the school may soon be held accountable. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fox and Friends First. James O'Keefe is expected to have tight security at the launch of his new book, American Pravda, My Fight for Truth in the Era of Fake News. Now, the book delves into his undercover investigation. It was dubbed Project Veritas, exposing hidden secrets of media giants since the 2016 presidential election.
The media releases no tape and asks us to believe anonymous quotes and single-sourced quotes. It's amazing because we've got 9 different engineers and executives on tape talking about shadow banning or censoring people so your friends can't see the messages. And now they say they have hundreds of engineers that go through private direct messages. In this country, people don't believe how bad it is.
American Pravda hits the shelves on Thursday. And 4 people are suing the University of California, Berkeley after they were injured in protest at a Milo Yiannopoulos appearance. Well, they claim that they were physically attacked by masked rioters and blame the school and Berkeley Police Department for providing, quote, insufficient protection for the event's attendees. And a liberal arts college is bowing down to the PC police, hoping to cut down on perceived bias. Williams College in Massachusetts is asking students to report color-coded signs for boys and girls. Anything colored pink for girls and blue for boys, name-calling and avoiding or excluding others is what the school calls intolerable, but has not revealed exactly how they'll punish the students. And President Trump has a favorite flavor of Starburst, and Twitter is outraged. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy telling the Washington Post that he asked a White House staffer to pick out all the red and pink candies that are the president's favorites for a gift. One user snapping, "Our taxes are paying for an employee to sort through Starburst candies to segregate all the pinks and reds for the narcissist in the White House." And then another person saying, "North Korea, homeless vets, all the issues going on in the world, and what flavor of Starburst POTUS eats is the issue the Washington Post chooses to focus on." What's your favorite? color. I don't know what mine is. Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is intensifying efforts to isolate North Korea, devising ways to enforce sanctions. This as the State Department issues a brand new warning. We are live coming up. And college campuses taking liberal identity politics to the next level with white racism classes. Are these lessons good for society or just creating a bigger divide? We debate it up next. Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson arriving in Vancouver overnight as dozens of countries huddle to find ways to enforce sanctions against North Korea. This as the State Department issues an ominous warning for would-be visitors. Kelly Wright is live for us in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Good morning, Kelly.
Heather, good morning to you as well. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will actually be serving as the co-host of this Vancouver summit. The 20 nations involved are seeking strategy on how to enforce sanctions and further isolate North Korea. Two countries that are absent from this summit are Russia and China. In a statement, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau explained why. Here's what he says. This is an opportunity to gather together a group of nations that are historically linked through the Korean War. That will be another piece we certainly hope and feel in the path towards resolving the conflict. As the summit gets underway, however, the State Department warns Americans who plan on traveling to the Hermit Kingdom to prepare for the worst, make funeral arrangements, and draft a will before going. The dire warning underscores the escalating tensions the U.S. now has with North Korea, and it comes on the heels of a false alert in Hawaii about an incoming ballistic missile on Saturday. Some congressional leaders from Hawaii are calling for direct talks between the U.S. and the North. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton says the U.S. must find a way to denuclearize the North.
It is right to be concerned about a possible North Korean threat, whether they push the wrong button in Hawaii or not. We've had too big a vacation for too long from people appreciating that rogue states with nuclear weapons can be a problem for the United States. That's why George W. Bush wanted national missile defense capabilities. That's why stopping North Korea, stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons is so important.
Yeah, and Ambassador Bolton also adds the nations must seek a peaceful solution but keep the military option on the table. Canadian officials, by the way, Heather, say they must find a way to tone down on rhetoric like, my nuclear button is bigger than your nuclear button. They say that could only add to further escalations.
All right. Kelly Wright live for us this morning. Thank you, Kelly. Well, a little bit more on this. The State Department says that a diplomatic solution to the nuclear problem in North Korea is the ultimate goal, as Secretary Rex Tillerson intensifies some efforts to isolate the rogue regime. Real Clear Politics co-founder Tom Bevan says that the recent developments on the peninsula are encouraging, but the Weekly Standard's Steve Hayes says that Kim Jong-un should never be trusted.
It's interesting that the Olympics seem to have sparked a little bit of a détente here. The idea that they will have a unified, perhaps, women's hockey team playing in the Olympics is a huge symbolic gesture. And the question is whether it's lasting in any way or we just go back to sort of these, the belligerent stances afterwards. But there's the opportunity, I think, which the South Korean president actually credited President Trump for starting, that these talks can be meaningful and we could actually see some movement in a positive direction, although it remains to be seen just how much.
Every reason to be cynical because we've heard this from the North Koreans for 3 decades. 4 times they violated international agreements saying they wouldn't build a nuke. 4 times they violated it, saying that they would take down their nuclear program. They didn't do it. I don't believe them now. Every time you see something positive coming out of the North Korean government, you should assume it's false.
Reading, writing, and white supremacy. More and more colleges and universities are now adding courses dedicated to detecting and combating white racism. But what if it was the other way around? Joining me now to debate, the conservative millennial Allie Beth Stuckey and former Democratic Missouri State Representative Don Calloway. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Thank you. So, Don, I'll start with you with that question right there. What if it was the other way around? What would we be talking about?
It really wouldn't make a lot of sense for it to be the other way around. Let's be very clear about this. In historical context, I think that all of us should be actively invested in the process of dismantling racism. Now, historically, that is something that is done where white folks have been in a position of privilege in this particular discussion of an ism, and various peoples of color have been in the position of being the targeted group. And I think that one way that you dismantle racism and make sure that it doesn't flourish in this generation for millennials such as Allie Beth is to make sure that we understand the historical underpinnings of it, and we work to make sure that these circumstances don't exist and are not allowed to ferment racism in the current generation.
Allie Beth, what do you
think? That's kind of
think?
the context, and that's the reason why you have a class called white racism.
Allie Beth, go ahead.
I think that we can all agree on the fact that racism and white supremacy in any form is wrong. So I think we can start there. We are all on the same page. That's not really my concern here. My concern is that these professors are allowing bias to drive their curriculum rather than honest dialogue. So I was in college not too long ago, just a few short years ago. One of my favorite courses that I took in college was taught by my favorite professor, and it was African American rhetoric, taught by a very liberal African American professor. And we talked about very difficult subjects. We talked about slavery, about Jim Crow, about racism in general, modern day racism, and never once did I feel targeted. Never once did I feel uncomfortable to raise my voice among people of other races that were also in the class, because it wasn't driven by partisanship and guilt. It was driven by open dialogue. And I'm afraid that the culture has shifted so much in the past few years now that the other side of the conversation is feeling criminalized and is feeling victimized to where they cannot speak up. That does not create a learning environment, and in fact, I think drives racism and drives polarization even more.
Well, let's take a look at this, though, Don, and I'll get your response to that. This isn't just one course at one university. Look at this long list. Florida Gulf Coast University, they call their course White Racism. Hunter College, Abolition of Whiteness. University of Wisconsin-Madison, the problem of whiteness. What if you had a course that said the problem of blackness?
That's racist. It is racist. I don't care what you say. That's racist.
Let me let Don respond to that. Don?
Thanks. I think Allie, she asked me. First of all, the titles of the courses are somewhat salacious. But if you get beyond those, I think that what we're getting to is an analysis of white supremacy as a historical construct that helps us explain some societal inequities that persist today. My only concern with Allie's analysis of her class in African American rhetoric is that I'm sure that was a wonderful and enriching experience. The problem is that your analysis of the courses that we're studying and talking about here today are purely speculative, because unless you've looked at the syllabus and examined all the texts that will be examined in those courses, I think you're kind of taking an assumption of what will be given and the way that this information will be presented.
Well, we
so
did,
we really don't know. We really don't know.
Yeah.
I do think it's reasonable that we would consider historical context of white supremacy and racism and having a way to dismantle it beginning today.
We did reach out to two of the schools, and we haven't heard back from them yet. Allie, you get the last word here.
But we have the one professor specifically that's been reported on that created a checklist for white supremacy, and we do know very specifically what that checklist was. And basically, it said if you are a white person that is benefiting basically from anything, then you are a white supremacist.
That's not what it said.
I don't think that's fair.
No,
that drives further racism and polarization. That's not what college is for.
That's not the definition of racism, and that's also not what the list said. But on the next segment, perhaps we can talk about
what racism
really is.
It's not your definition of racism.
Hey, at least we're having the conversation, and that's what needs to happen. All right. Thank you both for joining us. Appreciate it this morning.
Good morning. Take care now.
You too. Well, Chris Christie isn't even out of office yet, but his Democratic replacement already working on the plan to defy President Trump. The new handout said he's planning for illegal immigrants.
Do you agree with me? I said that Trump wouldn't have won if Dr. King were alive. Do you think that's true?
No, I agree with you.
Congressman John Lewis says that Martin Luther King Jr. would have saved America from President Trump. Carly Shimkus is here with the very different view. Good morning. Welcome back to Fox and Friends. First, in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the panel of The View imagined a world where the civil rights leader was still alive. Well, in the eyes of both host Joy Behar and Representative John Lewis, Donald Trump would not be president if MLK had anything to say about it. Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115 is here with the reaction online. So, Carly, What's the reaction?
Well, Georgia Congressman John Lewis appeared on The View yesterday. He worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of course. And the conversation quickly turned to President Trump after he said he doesn't think President Trump would be president today if Dr. King were alive. Take a listen.
Do you agree with me? I said that Trump wouldn't have won if Dr. King were alive. Do you think that's true?
No, I agree with you.
You agree?
If Martin Luther King had been alive, no, Dr. King would have been able to lead us to a different place.
But some of President Trump's supporters are angry that conversation turned political. Steve on Twitter says today was supposed to be about Martin Luther King's birthday. Another Twitter user disagrees with Congressman Lewis's political point of view, saying, "Are you kidding? He'd be in Trump's cabinet." Still, many others, Heather, on social media praised and applauded Congressman Lewis for his work during the civil rights movement.
All right, well, let's move on to this. Breastfeeding and a mother who was booted from Chick-fil-A because she was doing that?
That's right. So an owner of a Chick-fil-A in North Dakota has come under fire after asking a breastfeeding mother to cover up or leave the restaurant. Now, patron Macy Hornung said that she was barely showing more than what she was visible in her shirt, adding on Facebook, "The owner came to our table and asked me to cover. She told me if I chose not to cover, then she would have to ask me to leave." Well, the owner of that Chick-fil-A, Kimberly Flam, now apologizing, saying, "I would like to publicly apologize to Macy Hornung for the way I handled the situation on Saturday. My goal is to provide a warm and welcoming environment for all of my guests." But this has sparked a bit of a debate on social media. Sasha on Facebook says, "Such silliness. Sorry this happened to you. It is a baby feeding for crying out loud." But Pern on Facebook says, "I don't have a problem with women breastfeeding their babies as long as they use a cover. It is just good manners to consider everyone's feelings regarding this matter." It is illegal in North Dakota to breastfeed your baby in public, though, so that kind of settles that debate, right?
Well, speaking of families, a bigger family, this professional photo shoot went hilariously wrong.
It is a photo shoot one family in Missouri will never forget. That's because their pictures ended up looking like something out of a comic book. A woman named Pan Zering shared these strange images on Facebook saying, "We paid a photographer who claimed to be a professional $200 to $250 for a family photo shoot. She said the shadows were really bad on the clear, beautiful, sunny day, and that her professor never taught her to retouch the photos."
Oh, wow.
This is a photographer you clearly don't want to hire yourself. Now, I do have to say, I saw some real pictures of this family on Facebook. They are far more attractive in person.
Oh, I wonder if they got their money back.
My gosh, can you believe it?
Well, no, that's crazy. Thank you so much, Carly.
Thanks a
Appreciate it. Well, it was one of President Trump's most coveted campaign promises.
Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall.
President Trump taking a tough stance on immigration. His first year in office, the head of the National Border Patrol Council, Brandon Judd, here to break down the president's immigration